Live from Chicago, this is Bruce DuMont with our Beyond the Beltway analysis of national politics, featuring occasional injections of rumor and innuendo, all offered up by a panel of political insiders, pundits, power brokers, public servants, professors, and most importantly, plain-speaking Americans from coast to coast. Tonight, featuring commentary by Democrat Peter Hanna, Democrat progressive Georgia Logothaides, Kristen McQuarrie of the Chicago Tribune editorial board, and economist Mike Miller from DePaul University. Our program tonight coming to you from our home base at the Museum of Broadcast Communications, where our toll-free lines are open at 1-800-723-8289. That's 1-800-723-8289. If you'd like to email me a comment, it's brucedumont@museum.tv. You want to tweet me a comment during the show, which is my preferred way of communication, at least if you're going to do it by text. It's at Dumo, at D-U-M-O. Of course, you can join us also live on BeyondTheBeltway.com. If you missed the show, you can always find it there. And, of course, we are live on Facebook, and that's the Bruce Dumont Beyond the Beltway Facebook page. And also, we are live on YouTube. So people around the world perhaps are listening to us right now. I want to begin. We've got another jam-packed 2 hours for you. We've got great guests. Georgia Logothaides, you're sort of our card-carrying progressive with us this evening. You're with the Daily Cost. You've been a contributor for many, many years. Is there anything that Representative Omar from Minnesota has said that you think is anti-Semitic?
I think the suggestion of dual loyalty was anti-Semitic, whether she intended it to be so or not. I know there were many people in the Jewish American community that were deeply hurt about it. And it's one of those things that unless you kind of are aware of it, perhaps it was unintentional. I'm not going to try and impugn motives one way or another. But suffice it to say it was exceptionally hurtful, and I'm glad to see that the House took an action to obviously denounce that anti-Semitism as well as other types of isms, whether it be anti-Islam, anti-LGBT, any type of ism. And I think that that's what we need more of in this country, more people standing up and saying that this type of, comments about other people are just not tolerated.
Peter Hanna, you're our other progressive this evening. Answer to the same question, and your background, you came to the United States from Egypt, so give us your assessment of what she said and maybe what she was trying to accomplish.
Yeah, no, I agree completely with Georgia. I think what she said fits into a lot of anti-Semitic tropes that I think can be deeply hurtful and obviously have a long legacy of damaging and targeting specific people. So I think it was obviously wrong. I think it fed into a narrative that I think we don't want to advance as a country or have our legislators advancing. So I think she should own up to it. And I think the House and Congress are taking some steps to condemn all sorts of anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, anything against LGBTQ people. I think that's the right approach.
Mike Miller from DePaul University, is this the gift of the Democrats to the Republicans that might keep giving?
Oh, it's been going on and on. Socialism, open borders, extremism on abortion, 70% tax rates, and now this. It just keeps going and going. It's like, let's reelect Trump best we can. And I enjoy every minute of it.
Do you think her comments were anti-Semitic?
One time, you can misspeak. 2 times, maybe misspeak. 3 times, you can't do it. It's something that she feels. I just don't know. And to say that she didn't know what her words meant is insulting to her. I mean, she's a woman. She's an adult. She knows what she's saying. And she said something which is, to most of us, very disturbing. And I'm also disturbed that Congress, I'm not a big fan of Congress virtue signaling through all these kinds of bills that they pass and resolutions. But to take this one, where only one issue was at front and center, and then to lard it full of everything else, and then have her say in her first tweet after it was passed that the thing she was most happy about was it went against Islamophobia.
Right.
She has no ear, no political ear whatsoever.
Question to Kristen McQuarrie. Did she, from a political standpoint, did she win by the way the House voted on this? Does she come out like a winner, like something to celebrate, which is what her tweet certainly suggested?
No, absolutely not. I mean, to equate people's kind of devotion overall to Israel and call it driven by Benjamins is just really tone deaf. I think the resolution is silly. I think resolutions in general are just toothless and meaningless. But the fact that they didn't name her and that they threw every other ism into it, I think, is a way that they are trying to cover their own tracks. She's making things very uncomfortable for someone like Nancy Pelosi. But I don't think a resolution is meaningful at all.
Peter, do you think it's tone deaf? Or is she saying something that people think, but they don't have the platform to speak up?
You know, I want to separate the issue of her being allowed to say, you know, speak freely and express her view, and the substance of what she said. She can say whatever she wants, and she was elected by you know, constituents
Absolutely.
to speak her mind, and obviously she has the right to do so. But I think the content of what she said, you know, was a little bit tone deaf, and I think she has to look at
What do you mean by tone deaf? Explain what you mean by that.
tone deaf. I think we all, hopefully, all agree that it means really just contextually aware of the moment, of, you know, the speaker, the listeners, and sort of the context that surrounds the comment. You know, Representative had some regrettable tweets in her history that, you know, she since deleted, and you may find a couple of anti-Semitic tropes in those tweets as well. So, you know, if I have that in my history and I know it's out there, I want to take as many, you know, make as much of an effort as possible to make sure I'm not making those kinds of comments to corroborate, you know, a story or a narrative that, you know, my opponents and, you know, frankly, the Republicans in the Senate and in Congress might use against me. So
Georgia, there are those that have suggested that AIPAC has had an incredible thumb on the scale of the discussion of U.S. foreign policy for decades. Is there a way to say that without being perceived as anti-Semitic? And if you're anti-Israel or you're questioning Israel, does that automatically make you anti-Semitic?
Questioning the foreign policy of another country doesn't make you anti the people of that country. It makes you anti the governmental policies of that country. That being said, I think she missed a really prime opportunity to make the point that she, I think, was trying to make, which is that foreign interest lobbying has too much sway over our policy, whether it's from Israel representing the interests of Israel or representing the interests of Egypt or representing the interests of a host of other countries. You need not look further than the Trump Hotel to see how many foreign governments are hosting their fundraisers there and are trying to take advantage of that sphere of influence. So I think she could have came out and said, foreign governments in general and their lobbyists and their affiliates have too much sway on our American policy. And I think that that would have had a much higher rate of support, especially among people that are in Trump's base who do have this view of America first and do think that the American government hasn't had the interests of the American people at heart. She completely obviously didn't say that, bungled, I think, what she was trying to say. But if she had gone with that instead, I think we would have had a much more different discussion.
But again, how widespread is that in the House? We hear about the three new members of Congress, and they're the threesome. But is it broader than that?
Is what broader than that?
Is the feeling that they bring to the table, whether it's socialism or whether it's this strain of perceived anti-Semitism, is it broader than three female members of the House?
I think they're definitely pushing the party to the left, yes.
And Bernie Sanders, he's not challenged him on that.
Well, I mean, he's leading in the polls right now also.
That's
so, I mean, maybe this is the direction that progressives and Democrats want the party to go, because you don't see a lot of pushback. There's no conservative Democrat anymore.
And Bernie Sanders
1-800-723-8289. I'm Bruce DuMont, back shortly from Chicago.
Live from Chicago, it's Saturday Night Live, The Experience. For the first time ever, get an inside look at the making of SNL. Over 500 artifacts direct from the show. Be a part of Wayne's World, Weekend Update, and so much more. Experience all it takes to put the show together. Now at the Museum of Broadcast Communications at 360 North State Street in Chicago. For tickets, visit museum.tv.
A line is a powerful thing. It connects the global economy to your living room. Cleaner air to stronger markets. Factory floors to less crowded roads. Today's progress to tomorrow's promise. Norfolk Southern. One line, infinite possibilities.
back on the air. Let's continue our conversation. We were talking about the influence of AIPAC and some of the mistakes that have been made, at least described by mistakes, that these, at least the new members of Congress are making. And they're creating a problem for the party. Would you agree with that? Is it a problem for the party, or is it an opportunity for the party?
I think it's an opportunity. I mean, look, is there a PR issue with having to bat down some of their kind of either mess ups, as it might be in the case that we were just discussing, or whether it's a case of being overly ambitious, like AOC, in terms of, I think, the Green Deal that was put out. A lot of the candidates are going to have to respond to elements of it that they may not agree with. That being said, it's a huge opportunity for the party, because I don't think you've seen the Democrats so energized in terms of debating new ideas. They may not all agree with them or the spectrum of them, but there's actually a debate happening on climate change. There's actually a debate happening on what the new economy in the gig economy looks like. And these are issues that these young leaders have brought forward. When we're talking about a presidential candidate who has put out a plan on maternity leave, when was the last time we heard a debate about that being front and center? And so I think that they're raising issues from a generation that we haven't really discussed before.
Is there a place in that debate for U.S. foreign policy towards Israel, and whether or not there are influences? Let's talk from your perspective. I mean, there's a lot of influences. I mean, anti-Semitism is growing around the world. It isn't just in the United States. This discussion, I mean, is this a discussion that is healthy for the body politic? It may be embarrassing to the Democrats at the moment, but is this a healthy conversation to have?
I think it's always healthy when you look at your, foreign allegiances or foreign entanglements, to go back to the founding fathers, and assess sort of, are we doing the right thing? Are we doing the best thing for our people, for the world at large? But I think there's a layer of sort of what the media latches onto and kind of artifice that is so, will so readily subsume the actual issue. So I think these are important questions, and there's room in the debate to have it. What I would say is, kind of the point you made earlier, Georgia, is this is really an opportunity to look at the power that lobbyists have across the board, not just AIPAC and, Israeli lobbyists, but oil lobby, coal lobby, every lobbyist who has influence with our legislators. And I recommend, your viewers should watch what is now the most popular, most viewed Twitter video in history, which is the 3 or 4 minute questioning by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to folks about the power of lobbyists and how they could basically, within the bounds of the law, use the law to get their policies into, enacted.
I think it's fine to have I think Israelis wake up questioning their own government. It's okay to have that debate and to kind of always be re-examining the relationship between Palestinians and Israelis. And I think and I also am one of these people who I don't like when the Twitter war starts and everything gets exaggerated, and we're so politically correct that we're gonna try to get into her heart and determine whether or not she's an anti-Semite. I don't know. So I think there is a middle ground to have these discussions and to not have everyone have an exaggerated response to them. And maybe that is the only silver lining out of her comments, is that perhaps we will have more of those discussions.
Is there any parallel between questioning Israel as one of our allies and the way that Trump was pilloried by the left when he said, NATO, maybe you ought to carry your own weight, maybe you ought to put more money into defense, and people attacked him mercilessly that he is turning away our French comrades since 1783 or something like that, and the British and the Germans and so forth. And how dare he question and get in between the Germans and the United States, the French and the United States. And now I
think it's apples and oranges, because talking about the bilateral relationship with one specific country is completely different than questioning an agreement that has stabilized the world and has led to the longest period of world peace. When you talk about what NATO has done for the United States, I mean, you hear Trump a lot talking about, well, what we do for NATO. What NATO has done for the United States, talk about after September 11th, the lives that they put on the line to help fight the war that was started when the Twin Towers went down. So questioning the NATO alliance, I think that's why you saw such a blowback about it, because it was talking about an alliance that has stabilized the world. And there's a reason why we haven't had a world war since.
I think he was more questioning the financial commitment of the other countries.
Yes,
and I know he crossed the line, but we are NATO. I mean, if you look at the financial contribution that we have made, and that it's true other countries have not. I think that is an example of a story that got really blown out of proportion. He wasn't talking about dissolving NATO, I don't think.
I don't think so.
But he was really pressing to have these other countries owe what they are supposed to be paying and what they agreed to pay to be part of what is a very expensive organization.
And
And
he
that
was
also-
attacked for questioning that loyalty between us.
And that plays, that's a big, strong appeal to his base as well.
Oh, yes.
That foreigners are not paying. And now the administration is considering whether or not to tax countries where our soldiers are stationed and charge them. I mean, they're there because we choose to have them there. They have led to the stability of peace in the world, and yet the next thing is, okay, let's send a bill to Japan and let's send a bill to South Korea.
I guess I wouldn't be
Where
so
does that come?
I wouldn't be so sensitive about it if the United States was not attacked by both within the country, by the left, and others, that we're militaristic and we put way too much of our budget into the military. We do that because we have to carry others on our back. And so the fact that these other countries aren't paying their portion, if we're going to have to pay it, and then you attack us for being militaristic, it bothers me. I don't like that. I do what you're not willing to do, and then you attack me for doing what you expect me to do.
I don't think people
That's a
are saying
problem.
that we're spending too much on
Oh,
defense.
they do all the time.
In terms of, I think one of the big issues is the accountability of the money. When you have the Pentagon reporting that it can't account for some $1 out of every $3 that's been allocated to it.
And I've
the
actually-
military's attacked all the time that it's way too much of the budget.
Peter.
And back in my private practice days, I worked on certain government contracts involving the military, and I could tell you that just from my own personal interactions and obviously this is anecdotal evidence, there's a lot of money, and a lot of money does disappear.
Of
And
course,
when you look at our
in all of government. That's why
but
many
it's
of us are for small government.
particularly egregious when you look at the defense how much defense takes up of the whole budget, because we're not talking 1% or 5%, we're talking about the largest portion. So when you scale up those missing $1 out of
Largest portion of
$3, the largest portion of the entire national budget.
No. The largest portion of the discretionary budget.
Right.
Not
but-
the government spends $4 trillion.
Yes, of course, you're right.
The government,
sure.
the military is only 25% of
kinda
that.
like
It's not
formalistic distinction, but yes, the discretionary budget.
And it's the one thing
when
it
you're
says
talking
in the
about-
Constitution.
One at a time, one at a time.
Because I'm trying to say that we have billions upon billions of dollars being spent on defense, and if 1 out of 3 of many, many billions of dollars are completely lost, that's a problem. Beyond that, the money isn't being expended because we have to protect South Korea
Sure it
and
is.
Saudi Arabia.
Sure it is.
It's being spent largely on military contractors. And just, kind of...
People have to be fed.
There are, I mean,
think we're-
Tammy Duckworth, who obviously very progressive liberal senator from Illinois, also fought in Iraq, admits there is a lot of waste in the budget. And I think the frustration is that as fiscal conservatives, we can't keep holding up defense spending as the one area that cannot be touched. There can't, when there are calls for across-the-board spending cuts, if you even suggest that there is waste in the defense budget, suddenly you're unpatriotic. I think that's ridiculous.
Of course,
I think
I
there's
agree.
plenty of proof that there is waste in the defense budget as well, and it's very hypocritical of fiscal conservatives to not just accept it, recognize it. You have budgets that have been produced by like the Rand Pauls and the Paul Ryans, where they have put together very detailed reports on how there's waste.
Sure, but I guess I'm reacting to those. I can only say it one way. On the left, including the new freshmen in the Congress,
The trio.
that we are militaristic. We spend way too much compared to the rest of the world on the military.
Well, 54% of our discretionary budget is
Of
on
course.
the military.
And of
And
course,
that's a
the one
lot, and
thing
that's
that the
much-
Constitution says that the government is absolutely required to do is to protect us from all, all foes, domestic and
The
foreign.
Constitution says a
That's
lot
a
more
great.
than that.
So I'd like to touch on that
Oh,
point. So I
it's
think
one thing
one
you're
of the
supposed to
reasons
do.
why you do see people that are frustrated with the military expenditures overseas is because they feel like there's things that aren't taken care of here at home, which would strike me as a very Trumpian argument that would resonate a lot with its base. And you brought up the responsibility of the government to protect against enemies, foreign and domestic. We've seen reports come out this year about the rise of domestic terrorism, the extreme rise in domestic terrorism groups, hate groups, groups that seek to bomb government agencies, assassination threats against members of Congress, against even state and local officials. And yet we haven't seen the effort put forward, at least publicly, to renounce those groups, to go after them, and the types of funds necessary to dismantle their networks. And so this was a report that, if you remember, we first started talking about this in the Obama administration, and he was pilloried for having his administration release a report on the rise of hate groups and domestic terrorism and domestic extremists. And now we've seen the problem get even worse. So yes, it is the government's job to protect against
Yes.
enemies, foreign and domestic,
Yes.
and that is certainly an issue, I think, where we've fallen by the wayside here at home.
And I want to ask Kristen,
Yeah.
why do you think it is that there's this kind of, when it does come to talking or engaging fiscal conservatives about the budget, why is there this just instant, don't touch defense? Is there any way around that or any way to get through?
I mean, I think it comes from sort of a fundamental belief that you're hearing in this room, that that is the number one priority or responsibility of your federal government is to keep you safe. And there is a lot of patriotism connected to wanting to take good care of soldiers who are away from their families, who are serving overseas, who come back with tremendous medical conditions. So I think it just sort of comes from that fundamental place of the Constitution. But I think it's a place of hypocrisy when you have, and I'm not suggesting that we drastically cut the defense budget, but even Trump's budget that he's going to put forth, I think tomorrow, has like a $700 million increase. And when you are looking at waste, and that's what we talk about all the
waste is
time,
not an issue.
and there are
I mean, it
reports
is an issue, but
of military officials having, steak and lobster dinners flown to them 3 times a week. It puts
It's a problem.
fiscal conservatives, and I am one, in an awkward place.
Absolutely.
We've got to pause. We also should talk about military housing, which is becoming a disgrace as well. Back shortly from Chicago.
Flintstones, meet the Flintstones, they're the modern Sonic family. From the town of Fairfield, meet George Jetson. His boy Elroy.
With instant acceleration, electric cars are more fun to drive and more affordable than ever. Electric cars are here. Plug in to the present.
Dallas, St. Louis, Nashville, Tuscaloosa. All major cities to feel the destruction caused by a direct hit from a tornado. Is Chicago next? It's not a question of if, but when, and the clock is ticking. Learn what to do now at ready.illinois.gov to become tornado ready.
Bruce DuMont back on Beyond the Beltway. Thanks very much for joining us. We say farewell to Peter Hanna and also Mike Miller, who joined us for our broadcast. And in the last couple of segments, we're going to be talking about what's happening in Chicago politics. And we have Kristen McCreary of the Tribune and Georgia Logothides staying with us because they are veterans of the Chicago political scene. And we're also welcomed by Shia Campos. And she is the the editor of the Illinois Playbook, which is part of the Politico.
I wish I was the editor, but
Well,
I'm
don't you
the
edit?
reporter. I'm the reporter.
You're
I
the
have an editor
reporter.
above me. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, very good. Well, congratulations. You do a nice job of
Thank
reporting
you.
as well.
Thank you.
But again, the Illinois Playbook is must read for anybody who's interested in politics in Illinois. And again, it's nice to have you with us.
Thank you.
And you've been a guest over the last couple of months on this program. The Chicago mayor's race is important for those listening around the country. We hope that you will engage us because this is important because for the first time, we have 2 African American women running for mayor. They finished 1 and 2 in the recent primary. And the third person who was left out was Bill Daley, who was the brother of the former mayor and the son of the former mayor. And so the big news at that moment was that a Daley lost in Chicago, and a person by the name of Lori Lightfoot, who most people did not know, she ran first. And in second place was Tony Preckwinkle, who is the president of the Cook County Board, which is the 3rd largest county in the United States. So this race has gotten nasty already. Are you expecting it to get nastier, Shia?
I hope not. They just had their first debate, and it was really ugly. There was finger pointing, talking over each other. The word liar came out a few times. It was really ugly, and I'm hoping now that they got it out of their system, and now we
See,
will
and I call that
focus-
good television.
It was great, great. I mean, people kept emailing me saying that they wished it was longer. It was a whole hour, and they wanted more because of the drama. But we didn't hear a lot about some of the issues, and I think they have 5 more debates, and I hope that we hear more about their positions on different policies during that time.
The next debate is going to be Tuesday morning at the Chicago Tribune. Kristen McCurry, you're a member of the editorial board. You're going to be part of this debate with these candidates. And we should mention for those listening around the country, the Tribune in round number 1, you endorsed Bill Daley for mayor, and obviously he didn't make it. So you had an opportunity to endorse either of these two people before, and you chose someone else. So when you're sitting down to ask them questions to perhaps make another editorial, what is it that you're looking for and your colleagues at the Tribune might be looking for?
Well, I mean, the Tribune is traditionally a more pro-growth, free market. This is the opinion section, not the newspaper. So we were looking for someone who could grow Chicago, who is going to make Chicago a place where business owners want to come, who's going to really pay attention to the neglected South and West Sides, and that was one of Bill Daley's themes. So I think this go around, we're still going to be looking for that. The difficulty with these 2 finalists is that policy-wise, they're not very different. It's not like one candidate has a vastly different view of how Chicago public schools should run. There isn't someone who has a vastly different view about the police department. Neither one of them has a really different view on city finances, and in fact, Lori Lightfoot, in one of the first campaign packets she put out, didn't even have a tab on city finance, didn't even have like that, just wasn't on really among her key priorities. So we will be looking for how voters can distinguish these two, because it is kind of tough policy-wise, but also who has sort of this pro-growth, who can stop the exodus of residents from the city of Chicago. We're the only city of the top 10 that continues to lose residents every year. Those will be sort of the goals of our session with them.
Georgia Lugothides from the Daily Cost also joins us, a veteran observer of the Chicago political scene. You have 2 progressive women running for mayor.
Yeah.
I mean, are progressives in a no-lose situation?
I think so. I think that, they've kind of broken up into their camps already, and they go on kind of anecdotes I see a lot in terms of, oh, well, I heard this story about Lori, I heard this, my interaction with Tony. So it's almost, even though we're such a huge city, it's almost become retail politicking on a micro level in terms of who you're picking with when you talk to progressive leaders in the city. But yeah, on policy, I think that both of them are offering a progressive vision of Chicago, which is sorely needed because, and I think this is the one key issue that you mentioned, the complete neglect on the south and west sides of the city. We talk a lot about, when the Mayor Rahm Emanuel was talking about bringing in Amazon, right? When he was talking about, a blue line, taking care of a new transit system from O'Hare to downtown. Everything's been talking about the loop, about the downtown area, and I think the progressives are finally clamoring for a candidate who's really paying attention to the neglected side of the city.
Mm-hmm. And as we look at sort of the money that's coming in, how has the money come in? Again, one is the president of the Cook County Board, that's Toni Preckwinkle. Even if she loses, she's going to be the president of the Cook County Board.
Right.
So she clearly has an advantage in fundraising because there are people who can fear her for a variety of reasons.
Right. Well, she has the unions behind her right now. She has the biggest unions behind her, and she's slowly getting some of the trade unions. But that didn't seem to matter the first time around. Lori Lightfoot had far less money and surpassed Toni in the election. So maybe money won't matter so much this time. Though Lori is racking up more money this time since she's made it into the final, including from business people. John Canning, who's a really well-respected businessman and civic leader, just gave her $100,000, and the money is great, but it sends a message to business leaders across the city that he is supporting her, and I think that that'll have an impact.
Does that money from John Canning, does that sort of blemish Lori's message? Her message is that she's an outsider. She's very smart. She's a lawyer, but does that give her her opponents suggested that maybe the business community, they found someone that they can deal with Lori, and that may not be good on election day. It may be good in the bank book, but it may not be good in the ballot box.
I think it is tough for her now because she needs money. She needs money. She needs support. She has to get on TV more. So she has to turn around and sort of court some of these groups that she has in the past shunned. I mean, she also just got the firefighters union endorsement. I can't imagine that was a group that normally would coalesce around someone like Lori Lightfoot, who's been very tough on police reform and public safety reform in general. I think Canning is a unique example because he is kind of respected across the board. He's not as much of a, if like Ken Griffin or someone turned around who's really controversial and very, very aligned with conservatives. If she accepted money from someone like that, it would be dangerous for her. But I think it is kind of an uncomfortable position for her to be in now that she's made it, where she needs to sort of step back and start raising money.
Now, she's been the head of the police board, and again, that her pet issue has been her ability to deal with police-related issues, and yet that history has created some problems for her politically, because there are many, or some out there in the progressive community that view her as a cop because she was a former federal prosecutor, and they dismiss all of the things that she did as a lawyer and as a prosecutor. They sort of dismiss them, part of their maybe anti-police bias. And she's got to fight against that, looking for progressive votes.
Yeah, we spoke in the earlier segment about Kamala Harris and kind of a similar problem she
Yes.
has, where she came from a prosecutorial background and then suddenly is becoming an advocate for police accountability and reform. And it's a
And
delicate.
she took hits. She took hits for that.
hits, absolutely. But I think at the end of the day, I don't think that they're going to necessarily hold it against her, but it'll be a tougher sell. In other words, she's going to have to lay out a very detailed plan on police accountability and reform and how she's going to protect the communities to make up for the fact of the skepticism that people have on that front.
The person that ran third was Willie Wilson, who has been a guest on this program, and he endorsed Lori Lightfoot on Friday. I don't think too many surprises, but there's already been controversy surrounding that because of allegations Tony Preckwinkle has made that maybe that was an endorsement that was bought.
That's what Tony said. Lightfoot's team says that wasn't the case with the endorsement, and I believe Willie Wilson said that wasn't the case. So we have to take them at their word. And
Tony said basically that when he met with her, he wanted her to pay off his debts, and he said he's a multimillionaire. He said, I don't need anybody to pay off my debts. But then there was also a question about whether he asked for some input to be able to appoint members of boards or commissions.
Right.
And there's a lot of denials going on there, but I'm sure that subject must have come up.
well, sure, isn't that what happens when
Yeah.
you are in this
When you're
position?
dancing.
You're dancing and wanting somebody's
get close.
endorsement. Yes, what you'll promise and to what extent you'll promise.
Is that something that can be tracked down, Kristen?
I mean, no.
it
At this
make any
point,
difference?
I don't think so. It's like he said, she said. And the bigger issue is that he has had a very contentious relationship with Tony Preckwinkle all along. I mean, that's a lot of the reason why he's running.
And taxes was his number one issue.
Taxes.
And she's a big taxer.
Yes, well, the soda taxes, and also just he views her as very much an insider, clout-driven, giving jobs to aldermen's children. These are all things that came up when they came to the Tribune editorial board. We sat them next to each other, and it was, she was touching his shoulder at times, and he was pulling away, and there's no love between the two of them. So I think Lori was also just a natural pick because she has been up to this point kind of an outsider trying to rail against the system.
Does she have momentum at the moment? At this
She has
again?
huge momentum.
Got
I mean,
3 weeks to go. That's a long.
I
long
know.
way.
I don't know that she can keep it up, but I mean, I credit momentum with the reason that she pulled this off. I mean, we were all sort of anticipating probably a Bill Daley, Tony Preckwinkle in the mix type runoff, and she got the Sun-Times endorsement like right at the right moment. She used it really smartly, and then she had the video of her kind of confronting a state lawmaker over a property tax issue, and she just crested, and so much of political campaigns are about that.
Yeah, she peaked at the right time, and now she's got 3 weeks to see if she can keep the momentum going. We'll talk more about some of the issues in this race from around the country. And again, it also might have an impact on 2020 presidential politics, because whoever is the mayor of the city of Chicago, at least traditionally, has been able to weigh in on that big decision. I'm Bruce DuMont, back shortly.
If you look hard enough, go off the beaten track far enough, you'll find an America teeming with the unusual, the odd, the downright strange.
I'm Will Klinger, and I'm your guide on a package tour we like to call
Wild Travels.
Join us on our weekly road trip to see America's most offbeat and unusual attractions. Wild Travels, available on your local PBS station, or it darn well should be.
When CSX moves forward, so do the rest of us.
Bruce DuMont, we continue on this Chicago edition of Beyond the Beltway. Nice to have you with us. We're talking about the race for mayor in the city of Chicago, and one of the things that I want to just share with our national audience is, again, we have two African-American women. They are both running for mayor. They came out of the runoff, which was a couple of weeks ago, and there were a total of 14 people running in the campaign. And in looking at the city, I mean, this is amazing, is that there is no Caucasian candidate for mayor of the city of Chicago, which is the first time that's ever happened. So my question to you, Lori, is, not Lori, but Kristen, what happens to the white voters in Chicago? I mean, they either went for Daley, they went for Jerry Joyce, or they went for Paul Vallis, or for Gary McCarthy, the former police superintendent. So they were split a variety of different ways. Where do you think that vote will go?
You know, it's interesting. It's two different ways. One theory is that people in the end vote for their own self-interest. And so if you're a firefighter, cop, if you have a contract with City Hall, I mean, we're talking about city government that has 35,000 employees, and then if you think of all the contracts and all of the the way that the status quo is working for you personally, I think Tony Preckwinkle is probably a safer bet, and that goes for white voters, black voters, all different types of voters. But the other issue is Lori Lightfoot did do really well in white wards, and
Usually ran second.
She usually ran second. And I think just over time, Tony Preckwinkle has been a little more divisive. Her record is a little more divisive. She talks a lot about black and brown people and kind of uses terminology to create division within the city. And Lori Lightfoot, because she's new, doesn't really have a record, so you can't really go after her in any way that way. So I don't know. It could be split. But I wouldn't rule out Tony Preckwinkle because she is the establishment candidate, and this is a city where at the end of the day, you're going to vote for who's going to give you a good police contract, a good firefighter contract, your consulting contract, your CTU, the Chicago Teachers Union has endorsed her, so you know they're going to get a good contract out of the next mayor if it's Preckwinkle.
And the fear that she's going to be the Cook County Board President even if she loses. So a question that I have asked and others are asking online, Georgia, if you are a progressive and you have the county board presidency already in your pocket, why would you not vote for Lori Lightfoot? Because then you would have a progressive in two top positions. Because if Lori Lightfoot is unsuccessful, she goes back to the boardroom at the law firm, and Tony Preckwinkle, is mayor, then it's likely that the next president of the Cook County Board is John Daley, who is the son of the Daley family. And is that a reason for progressives to think clearly and strategically about their vote?
I don't think that a lot of the rank and file progressives are going to be thinking that strategically about their vote. I think a lot of the people that know the inside game do, but if you ask the average Democrat on the street who they're going to vote for, I don't think they take that into account. I think they look at the candidates and they do view Lori as the outsider, as the one that can go in and shake up the system. And they view the system as needing to be shook up, particularly on the issue of influence. We've been talking a lot here about, well, you know, you're endorsing and you expect to get something on the back end. That's the way politics works here in Chicago, works everywhere. And I think what we've seen generally in progressive circles, not just here in the city, but as a national movement, is this pushback towards the influence of money in politics. And we saw it on the federal level with the passage of H.R. 1, which was an anti-corruption bill that was passed out by the House. And we're seeing it also here in Chicago with the introduction of various campaign finance reform bills at the city and state level.
Does the result of this election, which comes up on April 2nd, that's the general election, does the result of this election have any impact on the battle for the Democratic nomination for president, in your view, Sia?
Wow.
Loaded question.
I don't know. I mean, everybody looks to Chicago because we're the third largest city in the country, and we will have the most, well, I guess we should, it depends. We'll have an African-American woman leading the city either way, which gives Chicago a lot of attention. If it is a Lori Lightfoot, she would be the most powerful and influential gay or lesbian city leader in the country, which also adds influence. And that has an impact on presidential candidates.
Who might be affected by that? Kristen, do you have anybody? I mean, clearly, whoever wins, I mean, you're going to have someone who's either more of an establishment candidate. And by the way, Toni Preckwinkle, the president of the Cook County Board, she's also the chairman of the Democratic Party. So she's a big political leader. Lori Lightfoot is not. And Lori Lightfoot is certainly playing that card in her attempt to get votes. But I mean, whether a Bernie Sanders or whether a Kamala Harris or a Kamala Harris might like a former federal prosecutor as the mayor of Chicago, a woman of color. So these are things that we don't really know. I mean, so I do believe that whoever the next mayor of the city of Chicago is going to be, that person is going to be thrust into maybe a significant role in the 2020 presidential campaign.
Well, Toni Preckwinkle did attend Bernie Sanders' event last week. She was front and center, so that sends a message.
But she didn't go to one in 2016.
I think voters are so compartmentalized. You know, we're focused on the city of Chicago, and whoever the next mayor is, they're dealing with a huge budget crisis of out of control crime. I don't care that the numbers are down; they're still absolutely abysmal. A shrinking city. I hope the next mayor does not get caught up in the 2020 presidential.
In the last debate, which was on NBC5 Telemundo, at the end of the debate, when asked something that they admired about each other, Toni Preckwinkle said she admired the fact that Lori Lightfoot had basically come out and acknowledged her gay background. Mm-hmm. Was that a dog whistle, or was that? Did you believe that?
No.
You know,
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Or you didn't believe it? Did you believe it, or was it a dog whistle?
I'm writing about this tomorrow.
Okay.
And when I heard it, I paused. I thought that was kind of an odd thing to say. And there's a debate now in the gay community about whether it is or not.
Right. Last word to you.
Yeah, I do think it was a way of imparting knowledge that maybe voters didn't have about her.
Georgia
Because it's
Logothaides,
harmful
Shia
in a
Campos,
certain
and also Kristen McCreary of the Chicago Tribune. Thanks very much for joining us. I'm Bruce DuMont.
Welcome to the world, 2116. You can fly across town in minutes, or across the globe in under an hour. Whole communities are living on Mars, and solar satellites provide Earth with unlimited clean power. In less than a century, Boeing took the world from seaplanes to space planes, across the universe and beyond. And if you thought that was amazing, you just wait.
Today, fresh fruits and vegetables will go from a field in California to a grocer in Miami. A bottle of beer from Eagle Pass will journey to a restaurant in Manhattan. A 2x4 in Oregon will find its way to a townhome in Denver. A hybrid will say goodbye to Detroit and hello to a showroom in Austin. While a steel beam will leave a mill in Illinois for a high-rise in Phoenix. And a flat screen in China will head to an electronics store in Memphis. Because today, as every day, wherever you find business, you'll find us.
Live from Chicago, it's Saturday Night Live, The Experience. For the first time ever, get an inside look at the making of SNL. Over 500 artifacts direct from the show. Be a part of Wayne's World, Weekend Update, and so much more. Experience all it takes to put the show together. Now at the Museum of Broadcast Communications at 360 North State Street in Chicago. For tickets, visit museum.tv.